Yo, what's up guys? Jimmy here. I had to make this video because of this. If you didn't hear already, Mad Season has put out an excellent video on the migration that is happening between old school RuneScape and World of Warcraft streamers. If you haven't seen, there's like this massive number of creators that are pulling like thousands of views. In old school, a lot of these guys have somehow never played old school, which is kind of surprising to me. Maybe I was slightly older than the WoW crowd, but a lot of the guys who played WoW really hardcore were actually older than me. As a kid, like I remember not being able to afford the premium WoW sub, which was like $15. So I think like even to like 2006, I couldn't even afford the $5 RuneScape subscription. Maybe it was like '05, but somewhere in there. And our computer couldn't even handle WoW. But this video is just honestly insane. If you haven't seen it, I'll put it in the description. Mad Season is hitting on some just killer points, and I can't help but think that we're in like such an interesting time in gaming because like one, you have all these people who are literally like in their 30s and 40s, some are in their 50s or even older, and they enjoy games like massive multiplayer games, these RPGs, right? And what's just absolutely disgusting to me, it seriously is nasty, is that the entire gaming sphere that like a lot of us older people, and I'm saying older, but like literally an adult, right? Like if you're over the age of like 25, this probably applies to you, which I know like 99% of my audience is. And like the truth is, the reason that this whole conversation is happening is because of money, right? It's not like rocket science. And I just think that like something needs to kind of be said and people need to understand more of like what's even happening in gaming and stop telling themselves all these delusional lies about like, oh, like young people don't like MMOs anymore. Because I think that's kind of true, but you gotta rewind the clock a little bit, right? So if we really want to take it back, right? You're looking at an industry that started at least in the 90s. Like modern internet users basically like magnificently went up between like the years of like 91 through 2000. So like when I was born, I think like less than 1% of Americans had access to internet, like an internet connection, not in an office, but like at their home. And then by the time I was like 13, I think like 30% of people in America, or 40%. And then by the time I was like an adult, I think that number is now like, in the 90s or whatever. So what's wild though is that internet gaming grew so quickly that we never really had a chance to analyze one, what was going on, how things were growing, how quickly things were expanding, and what we even appreciated about this digital experience that we're having, as kids, and then into teenagehood, and then a lot of us as college students, and then now as professionals, right? So we have time, we have money. These are two resources that a lot of kids do not have. And the way that games are being built in the MMO industry has gotten progressively worse and like less cool, frankly, right? We can kind of be honest about the fact that why would a 15-year-old want to compete in a game like, let's just say, Black Desert, right? Where progression is largely going to be inhibited in the beginning unless if you have a bunch of time or money. And that kind of takes a lot of MMOs out if you think about it. Like all of the games with like tokens, when I say token, like a WoW token or RuneScape Bond or like Eve Plex, these types of subscription models, like there's a reason that Eve Online, which goes back to like the mid 2000s, right, was one of the first games to do a subscription model like a token. And it was also one of the first games that I remember, even as a kid, when I first heard of Eve, I think I was like 14 years old, that had a player base that was the average age of 30, which was like, holy shit, that's so old. And the truth was, those games attracted older people because of their complexity, sure. But there's also like this element of like, wait, these are kind of pay to win games that require a bunch of time and money. And you have to look at this whole migration as like one giant bit of content, right? So when I've gone into the world of content creation as an adult, right? I never streamed a single game before I was 18, let alone like 22 or 23 is when I did like my first stream. Like I was a hardcore gamer. I put in a lot of hours. Like I always tell people like, yeah, I was level 48 when the RuneScape 2 beta came out. And I was only like 11 or 12 years old at the time. I was like grinding as much as I could. I would like be chopping trees and doing homework or fishing, pushing toward my goals. And I'd like to think that, from all that time that I had, if I really look at like my productivity, sure, like I was not very efficient. I wasn't doing things the right way. I was having a blast, but I didn't like sweat it too hard. And for me, like this transition, as I understand it today, a lot of it's happening because one, a lot of these WoW players have never played a game that had as good of progression. Remember, this is about horizontal and vertical progression. It did not have as good of progression as RuneScape. The main things I would talk about are permanence, meaning like when you made progress, the game would either diminish that progress over time to sell more currency, to sell more tokens. There's a bunch of reasons that they do this, but it's also to introduce new player bases to the game, right? It's to introduce competitive nature to people who are arguably years behind. Why would they want to play, right? They're already years behind. In an industry that literally has been like, think of it like a man who's climbing a mountain, and every time he, takes a step forward, it goes up the hill a little bit, someone like adds a little rock to the back of his bag. Like eventually the bag gets so heavy that he doesn't want to go up the mountain anymore. And you have to think, okay, what about the guy who's like super strong and gets super strong? He manages to go really high up the mountain, but then like some other guy sees him way up there. Like if this is a race in any sort of competition, like why is anybody going to want to be like, oh, well, that guy's already super strong and he's already close? Like from a competitive standpoint, and I know not everyone is competitive, but from a competitive standpoint, you will never allow those people to be like in the same realm of player base, right? And what RuneScape has done really well, particularly with old school, is that, I'd give some credit to RS3 here, but RuneScape 3 kind of did the whole WoW model of like pay to win micro progression, except they even did it worse, right? If you don't even look at Iron Man, RuneScape 3 just absolutely did horribly. They did microtransactions with the Squeal of Fortune. They had premium currency that's got into like all these keys and the dust or whatever, which are basically just giant XP lamps and then XP boosting. Despite all of the advancement and progression that happens in MMOs, Old School made a game that, one, had repeatability, two, it has the vertical progression that really meets the demand of the hardcore player, but three, it also preserves the integrity of the early game, which is not an easy thing to do in an MMO, especially one in an industry where everyone around us, like look at every MMO that's been in the past 25 years, they've all missed the mark, right? They have constantly sold out all early game. Like WoW was literally like an ease curve where like the later you did levels 1 through 60, the easier it got, up until they literally gave you a one-click boost that would skip the entire leveling range. And you'll never see something like that in old school because people understand the magic of old school, how the game can be experienced and then re-experienced by as many characters as you need to. And I think I was fortunate as a kid to like have this perspective about gaming. I really think other games have completely missed this idea by selling out. And I'm sure you guys have heard it a million times, but the chase for money, I think, is very temporary that has happened previously. And this is probably the most important thing of what I'm even saying in this video, is that I don't think pay to win as a concept is super sustainable. I think people are greedy, people have money, a lot of gamers who want gains and have this nostalgic feeling of like either FOMO or even regret, right? Like people who didn't have time to invest in an MMO who want to buy their way through gains. We see that all over the place. I don't think these things are very sustainable markets. Like retirement homes in the future probably will make a bunch of money off pay to win games, right? Like a lot of these applications that are being built, mobile apps, etc., you'll see that happening time and time again. But I think what is really truly magical is that games like RuneScape that really focus on progression first, it manages to like take away this idea that like you have to be better or faster or more efficient, or you have to have been earlier. My buddy Offensi, this guy, Black Desert player, but he also loves MapleStory. He loves Raid Shadow Legends. He likes a lot of Korean MMOs, which arguably have been pay to win. But even trying to explain to him why old school RuneScape is really cool, it's a very interesting conversation because he's starting to see like the value. He's starting to see this different perspective that it's okay that he's not the first one there because he gets to have the same early game experience that people had 22 years ago. Other than like some Iron Man changes, it's almost identical to how it was over 20 years ago. I'm just happy to see that like people can keep experiencing RuneScape because of the people in 2012 who voted for old school to be kind of locked in. And it's no surprise that RuneScape 3 is kind of burned through all of that nostalgia. I think that as gamers, we have this massive responsibility to avoid spending on games that we don't like. And I think WoW people, like, they feel like their shackles are just like being broken. Like there's this massive weight that they've carried with like, okay, a new expansion's coming out, I have to play, I have to keep up. All these competitive guys trying to keep their lead. I mean, and yeah, you're gonna have people who love PvP, people who love PvE optimization, and like, don't get me wrong, the efficiency community, like all of these sub communities have immense value. But the point that I'm trying to make is that like you shouldn't ever feel the FOMO in RuneScape because the the FOMO in itself, it's not actually going to help you have any more fun. Like the FOMO in RuneScape, if anything, is like just participating, right? It is being there. Like if there's a new leagues out, like it might be worth trying. Like RuneScape's all about like going on adventures. Even in like Brighter Shores, horizontal and vertical progression were like one of the core problems that we had in the whole game. The game actually had, seemingly at face value, it has the backbone, not necessarily the execution, but it has the backbone for good vertical progression. What they've accomplished very well is that they set up this long line of different skilling nodes. There's problems with the fact that there is reskinning and stuff, sure, but each skill in itself is actually fairly decent, and you hear this time and time again, at least from the people who participated in the first month or so when the game was popular, that they had a good time with their skill. What Brighter Shores is really failing at right now, which it needs to address, I've mentioned some of these problems in my other video, is horizontal progression, meaning how do you make a player who enjoys one thing attempt a second thing, and then a third thing, and a fourth thing, which may not have anything in common. And RuneScape, I will say, just knocked it out of the park with horizontal progression. It gives you these constant little nudges in little directions that, hey, if you want to do this quest that you already have the attack level for, you might need a little herb lore. And it's not just questing. Anyway, when you get a skill high up in RuneScape, it's rewarding for your horizontal gameplay experience, whereas a game like Brighter Shores really fails this. And both of these games, in this case, actually don't really have pay-to-win problems. We enjoy games like High Spell because I think they do capture a lot of the magic that old school had, right? The idea is you don't want dead ends in a game. You just don't. Like, if you fish a ton of food, but that food can't even be used anywhere in your whole game, any skill investment you do into that skill might feel cool while you're doing it and getting higher versions of it, but if all of it's useless, what a horrible, horrible experience. Even shooters have like progression-based mechanics, and that progression usually is just called skill. Like skill is a progression mechanic. And if you can get better at something and it becomes more rewarding as you get better at it, that is progression. And that's what I like. So to me, I love the mystery of an MMO. I love the explorative side of not knowing exactly what's going to happen next. And truthfully, like people have asked me, like when I did my video on the river, someone commented like I'd love to hear why you hop games all the time. Like I like to know your reasoning of like how you draw that line. And my line, if you guys really want that answer, is that I do not grind a game when I feel like I already know everything that's going to happen next. When I look down the 1,000-hour journey and I don't see some elements of mystery, some elements of improvement, or some elements of, you know, me looking back 1,000 hours down at 1,000 hours ago and being like, I'm glad I did that.